The sad story of marvelous Marvin Hagler. Many people say it was the best 8 minutes of boxing ever. He was the best middleweight fighter in the whole world. Please welcome the amazing Marvin Hagler. He was one of the greatest fighters ever to get in a boxing ring. But what happened when he wasn't fighting left fans shocked, and the way his story ended still makes people upset today. Let's look at the sad story of amazing Marvin Hagler. How a champion was made. Marvin Hagler was born on May 23, 1954, in Newark, New Jersey. His childhood was really hard right from the start. He grew up in a poor neighborhood where life was scary and really tough. There was crime everywhere, and the streets were full of fighting. His family didn't have much money, and every day was hard just to survive. For young Marvin, staying alive wasn't just about having food or a home. It was about learning how to be strong enough to keep himself safe. In 1967, when Marvin was only 12 years old, his life changed completely. That summer, big riots started in Newark. These were violent fights between police and the black people who lived there, caused by years of bad treatment and anger. Fires burned all over the city, and the streets became like war zones. Marvin's family had seen enough. They packed up everything and left Newark, hoping to find a peaceful place to live. That place was Brockton, Massachusetts. At first, life in Brockton wasn't much better. Marvin was still a quiet, shy kid, trying to fit in, but something soon caught his attention: boxing. He walked into a local gym run by two brothers, Goody and Pat. Right away, they saw something special about Marvin. He didn't talk much, but he trained like he was on fire. He wasn't just interested in boxing, he was completely obsessed with it. Marvin once said, "If they cut my bald head open, they'd find a boxing glove. That's all I am. I live it." The Petronelli brothers didn't just teach him how to punch. They taught him how to think, how to stay calm when things got tough, and how to believe he could win. They helped him grow up, not just as a boxer, but as a person. Over time, Marvin started to change. He got really strong. He learned to fight in a special way called southpaw, which means he put his right hand forward, and this confused the people fighting him. He also trained his body to take punches without getting hurt. He got so tough that punches barely bothered him, but getting in the ring was just the start. Marvin's real fight was against a system that didn't want him to win. A fighter nobody wanted. Marvin Hagler started fighting professionally in 1973. His first fight was against Terry Ryan, a local fighter. The fight didn't last long. Marvin knocked Ryan out in the second round. It was a great start, and people could see he had real power and skill. But even though he started so well, Marvin didn't get the attention or chances that other fighters were getting. The problem wasn't that he couldn't fight well, it was that he was too dangerous. Fight promoters and other fighters saw Marvin as someone who was risky to fight but wouldn't make them much money. This meant he was too good to be an easy win. But he wasn't famous enough yet to make big money for everyone involved. So instead of getting chances to fight the best fighters, Marvin was avoided. Famous fighters didn't want to get in the ring with him. They were scared of losing to someone who didn't have many fans yet. Because of this, Marvin was stuck. He kept winning fights, but those wins didn't lead to bigger, better fights. The politics of boxing held him back. Big promoters ignored him. He was often left off the main events and had to fight in smaller fights that people didn't care about as much. This disrespect continued for years. But Marvin didn't complain. Instead, he just kept fighting. He took fights anywhere and against anyone. He traveled to different cities and fought in small places, often in front of crowds that didn't know who he was. Sometimes those crowds were even mean to him. Still, Marvin showed up ready to prove he was great. He once said, "I'll fight anybody. I don't care where or when." That wasn't just something he said to sound tough. It was really how he lived. He built up his record by fighting tough opponents, often with very little support and no spotlight on him. Each fight was a step forward, even if it didn't feel like it then. He knew he had to keep going if he wanted a real chance at winning a championship. Finally, in 1979, Marvin got that chance. He fought Vito Antuofermo for the WBA and WBC middleweight titles. It was his first big championship fight, and he fought with everything he had. Most people watching thought Marvin had clearly won. He hit more punches, controlled the ring, and looked stronger the whole fight. But when the judges announced who won, they said it was a tie. The decision shocked the crowd. Reporters and fans couldn't believe it. Marvin had done more than enough to win, and now they were keeping the title from him again. It was a painful reminder that even when he fought his best, he still had to fight against unfairness. That tie was more than just a bad decision. It showed how the system had been working against him from the beginning. But Marvin didn't give up. Less than a year later, on September 27, 1980, he went to London to fight Alan Minter for the same titles. Marvin didn't just beat Minter, he completely destroyed him. The fight only lasted 3 rounds. Marvin beat him with power, speed, and focus. When the referee stopped the fight, Marvin had finally become the best middleweight champion in the world, but even this great moment wasn't without pain. After the fight, a riot started in the arena. Many of Minter's fans were angry that a black American had taken the title from a British fighter. Bottles and trash were thrown into the ring. Marvin and his team had to be rushed out to stay safe. That it was supposed to be the greatest moment of his career, but instead it ended in chaos. He had proven he was the best, but the victory felt sad and bitter. The disrespect had followed him all the way to the top. And just when he thought things might get easier, his battles were about to get even harder. The champions were after years of being avoided, ignored, and denied. Marvin Hagler finally became the best middleweight champion in the world in September 1980, but he didn't take time to celebrate or relax. He went straight back to work. For Marvin, becoming champion was only the beginning. Now he had to prove that he deserved to stay at the top, and he did just that, again and again. His first title defense happened on January 17, 1981, against Fulgencio Obio Macias, an undefeated fighter from Venezuela. The fight was in Boston, and Marvin fought with the kind of intensity that fans were starting to expect from him. He beat Obel Macias down round by round, and in the 8th round, the referee stopped the fight. Marvin had won by technical knockout. It was a strong start to his time as champion and showed what was coming next. Over the next several years, Marvin Hagler defended his middleweight titles 12 times. He didn't just win, he dominated everyone. His fights were often brutal, and most of them didn't go the full distance. He fought all challengers and never avoided a single opponent. Fighters like Mustafa, Hamsho, Juan Domingo, Roldan, and Wilfred Scipion all got in the ring with him, and each of them lost. Some were knocked out. Some were cut so badly that the fight had to be stopped. Others were just completely outclassed from start to finish. But even as he crushed his opponents, Marvin carried anger on his shoulder. He never forgot how long it took to get the chances he deserved. And even now, as champion, he still felt disrespected. Media didn't give him the same attention they gave to flashier fighters. Promoters and TV people often gave more praise to boxers with big smiles and lots of endorsements. Marvin wasn't smiling. He was winning, but that didn't seem to be enough. One moment during this time showed just how much that lack of respect bothered him. Before a fight in 1982, the ring announcer introduced him as Marvin Hagler, leaving out the nickname Marvelous that Marvin had worked so hard to earn. That was the final straw. Soon after, Marvin went to court and legally changed his name to Marvelous Marvin Hagler. From that point on, everyone had to say it. For Marvin, it wasn't just about a name. It was about being seen, heard, and respected. The disrespect he felt didn't break him. It made him stronger. Every slight, every ignored headline, and every overlooked victory made him more dangerous in the ring. His fights became more than just title defenses, they were personal. He wasn't just defending a belt, he was demanding respect. What made Marvin so hard to beat was more than just his attitude. His fighting style was completely his own. He fought in a southpaw stance, which meant he led with his right hand and punched with his left. Most fighters weren't used to that, and it messed up their timing. He also had a chin that could take an incredible amount of punishment. Even when he got hit with clean shots, he kept moving forward. On top of that, Marvin trained like no one else. He lived a strict, disciplined life. While other fighters might party or take long breaks between fights, Marvin lived like a soldier. His body was always in perfect shape, and his focus never left the ring. And soon he would step into the ring for the most violent and unforgettable fight of his career, the Forgotten King, in the 1980s. Boxing entered what many people think was its most exciting time ever. At the center of it all were four legendary fighters: Marvelous Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas Hitman Hearns, and Roberto Hands of Stone Duran. They became known as the Four Kings, and together they helped create a golden age for the sport. What made this time so special was that all four actually fought each other. In today's boxing world, top fighters often avoid fighting one another to keep their undefeated records or wait for the right money deal. But the Four Kings were different. They didn't avoid fights, they didn't wait for years. They got in the ring and settled it the old-fashioned way, by fighting. And fans got to see some of the greatest fights in boxing history because of that. But even in this group of legends, Marvin Hagler stood apart for a different reason. While Leonard, Hearns, and Duran all got early fame and massive support, Marvin was the outsider. The others had huge media attention, big-name sponsors, and powerful promoters backing them from early in their careers. They were in commercials. They were smiling on magazine covers. They had star power. Marvin, on the other hand, had none of that. He had the Petronelli brothers, a small gym in Brockton, and a deep hunger to prove himself. He didn't get easy fights or big contracts. He had to fight through dangerous opponents in small places just to get noticed. His road to the top was built on struggle, not spotlight. And even after becoming champion, Marvin still felt like the odd man out. Sugar Ray Leonard was boxing's golden boy, handsome, charming, and loved by the media. Thomas Hearns had knockout power and was promoted as a rising superstar. Duran had already become a legend by the time he fought Marvin. Marvin had to keep reminding people he belonged. He carried that bitterness into every fight. He wasn't just fighting for titles. He was fighting to be seen as equal to the others. He knew that if he made even one mistake, the media would forget all the hard work he'd done. But if the others made a mistake, they'd still be treated like stars. That double standard ate away at him. When he faced Hearns and Duran and later Leonard, Marvin wasn't just thinking about winning. He was thinking about everything he had been through. Every time he was denied a shot, and every time the media chose someone else over him. Commentators often said Marvin seemed to fight with something extra, an anger or drive that other fighters didn't have. That's because for Marvin, every punch was personal. He beat Roberto Duran in a close 15-round decision. It was a smart, technical fight, and it showed that Marvin wasn't just a tough, aggressive brawler. He was a thinker in the ring too. Against Hearns, he delivered one of the most violent and memorable knockouts in boxing history, proving his toughness to the world. And when he fought Leonard, it was more than just a title defense. It was a chance to prove once and for all that he was better than the rest. But no matter how many wins he got, Marvin still had to fight harder than the other kings to earn the same respect. He knew that being great wasn't enough. He had to be better every time. He had to dominate. He had to destroy, and even then, sometimes it still wasn't enough. But one fight, just 3 rounds long, would finally give him the spotlight he had always deserved. Boxing's bloodiest night in April 15, 1985. One of the most unforgettable fights in boxing history took place at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. It was Marvelous Marvin Hagler versus Thomas Hitman Hearns, a fight that would later be called the War. This wasn't just a regular title defense. This was personal. This was violent. This was boxing at its most intense. The build-up to the fight was filled with tension. For weeks, the two fighters went on a 23-site press tour to promote the fight. At first, there was mutual respect between them. But city after city, interview after interview, things started to change. The long days of travel and constant media attention turned that respect into something else. Real anger. By the time fight night came, both men were ready to tear each other apart. When the bell rang to start round 1, the crowd expected a slow feeling-out process. That didn't happen. From the first second, both fighters exploded with punches. Hearns came in fast, throwing his powerful right hand. He landed one of the hardest shots of his career directly on Hagler's chin. It was a punch that would have knocked out most fighters, but Hagler didn't go down. He didn't even back up. He kept walking forward. That moment shocked everyone. If Hearns couldn't hurt Hagler with his best punch, what else could he do? What followed was 3 rounds of non-stop violence. Both fighters threw everything they had. There was no defense, just power, speed, and aggression. It was later described as the most violent 8 minutes in boxing history. Fans couldn't believe what they were seeing. This wasn't just a fight, it was war. Then something terrible happened. During the second round, Hearns opened a deep cut above Hagler's right eye. Blood started pouring down his face. It was a serious injury, and for a moment Marvin didn't even know it was happening. The referee stopped the fight to have the doctor check the cut. That's when Hagler's worst fear kicked in. For years, Marvin worried about losing, not because he was beaten, but because of a technical stoppage, something out of his control. Now, in the biggest fight of his life, that fear was becoming real. He was worried they might stop the fight because of the cut and give Hearns the win by default, but Marvin wasn't going to let that happen. When the fight started again, he came out like a man possessed. He ignored the blood and went straight at Hearns. His punches were fast, hard, and full of rage. He trapped Hearns, landed a crushing right hand, and knocked him down. Hearns tried to get up, but his legs gave out. The referee stopped the fight. It was over. Hagler had won in round 3 by knockout. The crowd exploded. Commentators were stunned. It was one of the most dramatic and emotional fights the sport had ever seen. Marvin didn't just win the fight, he willed himself to victory. Promoter Bob Arum later said, he willed himself to win. Even Thomas Hearns years later gave Marvin full credit. I can't take anything away from him, he said. His awkwardness messed me up. He fought his heart out. We put on a great show for all time. But even after all of that, the heartbreak wasn't over. The fight may have ended in glory, but the next chapter would bring the most painful moment of his career, and that moment was coming fast. The fight nobody remembers. On November 10, 1983, Marvin Hagler stepped into the ring to defend his middleweight title against one of the most respected names in boxing, Roberto "Hands of Stone" Duran. Unlike Marvin's brutal war with Hearns, this fight was a slow burn. It wasn't about raw power or violence. It was about strategy, patience, and control. Duran was no ordinary opponent. By that point, he had already been a world champion in 3 different weight classes. He had faced legends like Sugar Ray Leonard and held his own against the best in the sport. Duran was crafty, experienced, and incredibly tough. He wasn't going to be knocked out easily, and he certainly wasn't going to be scared. From the opening bell, it was clear this fight would be different from most of Marvin's others. Duran didn't come to trade wild punches or fall apart under pressure. Instead, he used movement, defense, and timing to frustrate Hagler for most of the fight. Duran stayed just out of reach, slipping punches and hitting back whenever he could. Marvin, who usually broke opponents down with steady aggression, had to change his approach. He realized early on that he wouldn't win this fight with brute force. He had to be smart. He had to stay patient. That's exactly what he did. For 15 hard rounds, the two men battled in what many boxing fans call a technical war. Marvin adjusted his pace. He cut off the ring, worked the body, and didn't get reckless. Duran was dangerous the entire fight, but Marvin never let him take control. As the rounds went on, Marvin's superior conditioning began to show. While Duran started to slow just slightly, Marvin kept moving forward, landing clean punches and winning the exchanges. By the final bell, Marvin hadn't scored a knockout, but he had clearly outboxed and outlasted one of the smartest fighters in the game. The judges all saw it the same way. A unanimous decision win for marvelous Marvin Hagler, even though it wasn't flashy. Many boxing analysts later pointed to this fight as one of Marvin's most complete performances. He showed everything: defense, footwork, timing, and ring IQ. He proved he could be more than just a tough, aggressive brawler. He could play the long game and win against a master technician. But like many moments in Marvin's career, this win didn't get the spotlight it deserved. Fans and media focused more on his knockout victories. The Duran fight rarely comes up in highlight reels, even though it was a showcase of Marvin's greatness. But the fight that would truly test his legacy and break his heart was just around the corner. Robbed in plain sight, on April 6, 1987, Marvin Hagler stepped into the ring for what would become the most debated and painful fight of his entire career. That night, he faced Sugar Ray Leonard, a fighter he had wanted to fight for years. Leonard had been retired for almost 3 years and hadn't fought a serious opponent in even longer. Still, the fight was promoted as the fight of the decade, and the world was watching. For Marvin, this was supposed to be the final stamp on his legacy. He had beaten everyone else: Duran, Hearns, all the top contenders. Leonard was the last of the four kings left to face. A win over him would silence all critics and prove once and for all who the best really was. From the start, the matchup was a clash of styles. Marvin Hagler was known for constant pressure, toughness, and power. Leonard, on the other hand, was all about speed, movement, and quick combinations. In the fight, Leonard used the ring well. He stayed on the outside, threw quick jabs and at the end of rounds to catch the judges' eyes. He didn't try to brawl. He tried to score points and survive. Marvin, as always, moved forward the entire fight. He landed the harder punches and controlled the pace. He didn't throw as many punches as Leonard, but when he did connect, the impact was clear. He focused on cutting off the ring and making Leonard work for every second. But when the final bell rang, it wasn't up to them anymore. It was in the hands of the judges, and that's when the heartbreak came. The decision was a split decision win for Sugar Ray Leonard. One judge gave it clearly to Leonard. Another had it slightly for Hagler. The third, who was considered neutral, gave it to Leonard by just one round. The boxing world erupted in controversy. Many fans and reporters believed Marvin had done enough to win, especially given how he controlled the pace and landed the more powerful shots. Critics pointed out that Leonard stole rounds by flurrying in the final 30 seconds, even in rounds where Marvin had done better work for most of the time. Some called it a robbery. Others said it was just smart boxing by Leonard. But to Marvin Hagler, it felt like betrayal. He had spent his whole career fighting for respect, often being ignored or overlooked. Now, even after finally getting the biggest fight of his career, he believed the sport had taken it from him. He felt like the decision was made before the fight even began, that the media darling Leonard was always going to get the win, unless Marvin knocked him out. After the fight, Marvin didn't beg for a rematch. He didn't complain to the commission. He simply walked away. He refused to fight Leonard again, famously saying, "Tell Ray to get a life." Just like that, he retired. At only 32 years old, Marvin Hagler left the sport of boxing, not because of age, not because of injury, but because of heartbreak. He didn't lose his love for the fight itself. He lost his faith in the system that controlled it. His retirement didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like an exile. One of the greatest champions the sport had ever seen left quietly, with no farewell tour, no final victory lap, and no chance to reclaim what he believed was stolen from him. He never fought again. The heartbreaking end, March 13, 2021. The boxing world was hit with news that no one was expecting. Marvelous Marvin Hagler, one of the sport's all-time greats, had passed away suddenly at the age of 66. He was at home in New Hampshire, where he had been living a quiet life with his wife Kay. There had been no reports of illness, no warnings. He was simply here one moment and gone the next. Kay Hagler shared the devastating news in a message on social media. She wrote that Marvin had died unexpectedly, surrounded by family. The announcement was short, but it shook fans, fighters, and sports writers across the world. In a time when people are used to hearing about long battles with illness or hospital stays. This was different. Marvin hadn't been sick. He hadn't been fading away. He had just left. The final bell had rung, and no one saw it coming. What followed was an outpouring of love and sorrow from around the globe. People who had grown up watching Marvin fight remembered, not just the knockouts or the titles, but the way he carried himself with pride, strength, and discipline. For those who knew him personally, it wasn't just a great fighter they lost. It was a deeply loyal and humble man. Even the men he battled in the ring came forward with heavy hearts. Sugar Ray Leonard, who had shared the ring with Marvin in one of the most controversial fights in boxing history, expressed deep sadness and respect. He said he was crushed by the news and called Marvin a true warrior and champion. Thomas Hearns, who had gone toe-to-toe with Hagler in the unforgettable War of 1985, also paid tribute. Despite their intense rivalry, Hearns never stopped respecting Marvin. He posted on social media that he was honored to have shared the ring with him and called him one of the best to ever do it. Roberto Duran, another of the legendary Four Kings, also shared his grief, calling Hagler not only a great fighter, but a good man. Promoter Bob Arum, who worked with Marvin during the height of his career, said, "He was one of the greatest people I've ever promoted. He was a real man, loyal and honorable." Arum's words echoed what many in boxing already knew. Marvin wasn't just great in the ring, he was great outside of it, too. Marvin Hagler's death left a hole in the heart of boxing. He had been more than just a fighter. He was a symbol of hard work, focus, and quiet greatness. He didn't chase the spotlight. It found him eventually. But in the end, it was never about fame for Marvin. It was always about respect. And even in death, that respect came flooding in.